The Galactic Council chamber was the largest room Tae-jin had ever seen. It was so big that clouds formed near the ceiling. Representatives from 47 different alien species sat in curved rows that went up and up like a giant stadium. Some of the aliens had tentacles, some had wings, some looked like walking rocks, and there at the front stood Emperor Vorthak of the Krithian Empire. Tae-jin sat in the back row with the other humans. Earth had only joined the Galactic Council 3 years ago. Humans were the newest members, and most aliens still didn't know much about them. The human delegation was small, just 12 people. Tae-jin was the youngest at 28 years old. Emperor Vorthak was massive. He had 4 arms, each one as thick as a tree trunk. His skin was dark purple and covered in scales that looked like armor. When he spoke, his voice boomed through the chamber like thunder. "I am tired," the Emperor said. His voice was filled with both anger and sadness. "I am tired of watching my daughter suffer alone." Next to the Emperor sat Princess Yuna. Tae-jin had seen pictures of her before, but seeing her in person was different. She was tall, much taller than any human. Her skin looked like it was made of crystal, shifting between blue and purple colors. She wore armor that had clearly seen many battles. Her face showed no emotion, but Tae-jin thought he could see something in her eyes. Loneliness, maybe. "My daughter is the greatest warrior in our empire," Vorthak continued. "She has never lost a battle. She has defended our people for 20 years. She is strong, intelligent, and loyal." He paused. "But she is also alone." The chamber was completely silent. Everyone knew about Princess Yuna. She was famous across the galaxy, but not in a good way. The stories said she had killed 3 suitors. The first one died during a simple dinner when he insulted her fighting style. She had broken his neck before anyone could stop her. The second one lasted a week before he said something rude about her appearance. She threw him off a balcony. The third one made it almost a month, but then he tried to command her like a servant. They found pieces of him scattered across 3 rooms. The problem was her biology. Krithians had something called rage cycles. When their emotions got too high, their bodies flooded with chemicals that made them incredibly strong, but also very dangerous. Most Krithians learned to control it. But Yuna's rage cycles were much stronger than normal. It was a genetic condition. When she got angry, she became almost impossible to stop. "I make this offer to the Galactic Council," Emperor Vorthak said. "Anyone brave enough to marry my daughter and survive 1 year will receive an alliance with the Krithian Empire. Your people will gain trading rights to 2 star systems. You will receive 1 million credits of gold, and your family will be honored forever in our history." The aliens whispered to each other. 2 star systems was an incredible prize. The trading rights alone would make someone's homeworld rich, but everyone also knew what happened to the last 3 suitors. "But know this," the Emperor added, and his voice became hard as stone. "If you marry my daughter and try to divorce her, you will die. If you harm her, you will die. If you abandon her, your entire world will suffer. This is not a business arrangement. This is a marriage. Treat her with respect or face our wrath." No one moved. Tae-jin looked around the chamber. The Vraxian ambassador, who was known for being brave, stared at his feet. The Torthian prince, who had seemed interested at first, shook his head slowly. Even the warrior races, the ones who prided themselves on courage, stayed completely still. Minutes passed. The silence became uncomfortable. Emperor Vorthak's face grew darker. Princess Yuna sat like a statue, but Tae-jin saw her hands grip the arms of her chair tighter. Tae-jin's heart was beating fast. He had been studying Krithian culture for 3 years. It was his job as a xenobiologist. He had read every report about the Krithian people. He had learned their language, studied their customs, and watched hundreds of hours of their cultural videos. And he had read every single file about Princess Yuna. Most people only saw the violence. But Tae-jin had read between the lines. The first suitor had called her fighting style unrefined and savage in front of the royal court. The second one had said she was too ugly to be a real princess because her skin was different from other Crithians. The third one had ordered her to serve him food like she was a servant, even though she was a princess and a decorated general. They hadn't just been rude, they had been cruel, and Yuna had reacted the only way her biology allowed when she felt attacked. Tae-jin thought about all the reports he'd read. Between the violence, there were other stories. Yuna volunteered at children's hospitals. She donated most of her military salary to war orphans. She had personally saved 17 soldiers during a battle, carrying them to safety one by one. She wrote poetry, bad poetry according to one report, but she tried. She wasn't a monster. She was lonely and isolated, and everyone was too afraid to see the person underneath. Tae-jin stood up. The movement was so unexpected that several aliens gasped. The human ambassador, Director Han Sol Park, grabbed Tae-jin's arm. "What are you doing?" she whispered urgently. "Volunteering," Tae-jin said quietly. "Are you insane? She'll kill you." "Maybe," Tae-jin said, "but I don't think so." He pulled his arm free and raised his hand higher. "I volunteer," he said. His voice wasn't loud, but in the silent chamber, everyone heard it. Emperor Vorthak's 4 eyes focused on him. The Emperor walked to the edge of the platform and looked down at the human section. "Who speaks?" "Lieutenant Tae-jin Kim of Earth," Tae-jin said. He walked down the stairs to the center of the chamber. He looked very small there, surrounded by all the giant aliens. "You are human," Vorthak said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, sir. Humans are weak. You have thin bones. Your skin tears easily. You come from a low-gravity world. My daughter could break you with one hand." "Yes, sir. She probably could." "Then why would you volunteer?" Tae-jin took a deep breath. He had practiced what he would say, but now all those words seemed wrong, so he told the truth instead. "Because I've studied your culture for 3 years," he said. "I've learned your language, I know your customs, and I've read everything about Princess Yuna. Not just the violent parts, everything. And I think she's amazing. I think she's been hurt by people who didn't try to understand her. I think she deserves someone who will actually try." The chamber erupted. Aliens shouted in dozens of languages. Some laughed, some looked shocked. The human delegation looked terrified. Emperor Vorthak raised one hand and everyone fell silent again. He studied Tae-jin for a long moment. Then he looked at his daughter. "Yuna," he said. "What do you think?" Princess Yuna stood up. She walked to the edge of the platform and looked down at Tae-jin. She was at least 3 feet taller than him. Her crystalline skin reflected the lights, making her look like she was glowing. "You've studied my culture?" she asked. Her voice was deep and had a slight echo to it. "Yes, Your Highness. Speak to me in Crithian." Tae-jin switched languages. "I have been learning for 3 years. My pronunciation is probably terrible, but I wanted to understand your people." Something changed in Yuna's face. Just a little. "You know what happened to the others?" "Yes." "And you still volunteer?" "Yes." "Why?" Tae-jin thought about lying, about saying something noble. But again, he chose truth. "Because I think you're worth the risk, and because no one else is brave enough to try." Princess Yuna was quiet for a moment. Then she turned to her father. "I accept him for the courtship trials." The chamber exploded with noise again. Tae-jin smiled. He had just signed up for what might be the most dangerous year of his life, but looking up at Princess Yuna, seeing the smallest hint of hope in her eyes, he thought maybe, just maybe, it would be worth it. The Crithian homeworld was hot, much hotter than Earth. Tae-jin felt like he was breathing warm soup as he stepped off the transport ship. Sweat immediately soaked his shirt. His human colleagues had tried to talk him out of coming here. Director Park had actually cried. But Tae-jin had made his choice. Princess Yuna waited for him at the landing platform. She wore simple training clothes instead of armor. She looked even more impressive in the bright sunlight of her home world. "The trials begin tomorrow," she said. No greeting, no welcome, just facts. "You have 1 day to prepare. Most suitors use this time to train or pray." "I'd like to visit the Royal Library," Tae-jin said. Yuna raised one eyebrow. "The library?" "Yes, please." For the first time, Tae-jin saw her look slightly confused, but she nodded and led him to the palace library. Tae-jin spent the entire day reading about Krithian hunting traditions, looking at maps of the royal hunting grounds, and studying the biology of something called a Ravager beast. The first trial started at dawn. A crowd of Krithian nobles gathered to watch. They looked at Tae-jin like he was already dead. The trial master, an old Krithian warrior with scars covering half his face, explained the rules. "You must hunt a Ravager beast with the princess," he said. "You must work together. If you fail to kill the beast within 3 days, you fail the trial. If you die, obviously you fail." Some of the nobles laughed at that. Ravager beasts were terrifying creatures. They looked like a cross between a bear and a lizard, with teeth as long as knives and claws that could cut through metal. They were fast, strong, and mean. Krithians hunted them to prove their courage. Yuna and Tae-jin were given weapons and supplies. Yuna chose a long spear. Tae-jin chose a small knife and a medical kit. The nobles laughed again. They entered the hunting grounds at noon. The Ravagers' territory was a rocky canyon with caves everywhere. Yuna immediately started tracking the beast, looking for footprints and marks on rocks. "Stay behind me," she ordered. "Try not to die too quickly." But Tae-jin had other ideas. While Yuna looked for the beast to fight it, Tae-jin started doing something different. He found the beast's droppings and studied them. He found where it drank water. He mapped out its territory in a notebook. "What are you doing?" Yuna asked, frustrated. "Hunting," Tae-jin said, "just differently." On Earth, early humans had been weak compared to animals. They didn't have claws or sharp teeth, but they had something better: endurance and intelligence. Humans could run for hours and hours. Most animals couldn't. So ancient humans would chase animals until the animals collapsed from exhaustion. Tae-jin explained his plan. Yuna thought it was stupid, but she agreed to try. For 2 days, they tracked the Ravager beast. Every time it rested, they pushed it to move. Every time it tried to hide, they found it. They didn't fight it. They just kept it moving. The beast got more and more tired. On the morning of the 3rd day, they found it lying in a cave, panting heavily, barely able to stand. Yuna walked up and killed it with one spear thrust. The nobles were shocked. They had never seen a Ravager hunted this way. Yuna looked at Tae-jin with new eyes. "That was clever," she said. The second trial was a feast. Tae-jin had to eat traditional Krithian foods. The problem was that Krithian food was poisonous to most other species. Their bodies processed chemicals differently. What was delicious to them could kill others. Plates of food were brought out, strange meats in purple sauces, vegetables that glowed slightly, drinks that smelled like burning rubber. Tae-jin ate everything. The nobles watched and waited for him to collapse, but nothing happened. He finished the entire feast and even asked for seconds. What the Krithians didn't know was that Tae-jin had been preparing for this for months. He had been taking small doses of Krithian food compounds, building up immunity slowly. His stomach hurt terribly, but he didn't show it. After the feast, he went to his room and was sick for hours, but he had passed the trial. Yuna visited him that evening. You prepared for this? She said. Yes, Tae-jin admitted, still feeling ill. Why? Because I wanted to be ready for you. Something in Yuna's expression softened, just a little. The third trial was a war game. Yuna and Tae-jin had to play a strategy game against each other using holographic armies. It was like chess, but much more complicated. Yuna won the first match easily. She was a trained general. Tae-jin was just a scientist. You're weak at this, Yuna said. There was disappointment in her voice. I am, Tae-jin agreed. But can we play again, using human historical battles this time? Yuna was curious, so she agreed. Tae-jin chose a famous Korean naval battle from Earth's history. He told her about Admiral Yi Sun-sin, who defeated 333 enemy ships with only 13 ships of his own. He explained the tactics, the strategy, the psychology. Yuna became fascinated. They played through the battle scenario. Then another and another. They stayed up all night talking about military history, both human and Krithian. Tae-jin learned about famous Krithian generals. Yuna learned about human warfare. For the first time, Yuna smiled. It was a small smile, but it was real. The fourth trial was pain. Both Tae-jin and Yuna had to receive traditional Krithian scars, marks cut into their skin to show they were married. For Krithians, it was uncomfortable. For humans, with their sensitive skin, it would be agony. Tae-jin refused the numbing medicine. If you feel it, I feel it, he told Yuna. The cutting began. Tae-jin's hands shook. Sweat poured down his face. His vision went blurry from the pain, but he didn't scream. He didn't ask them to stop. Yuna watched him. Why are you doing this? She asked. You could take the medicine. No one would think less of you. Because understanding your culture is worth any pain, Tae-jin said through gritted teeth. I want to know what you feel. I want to share this with you. Yuna's eyes widened. No one had ever tried to truly understand her world before. They had tried to conquer it or escape from it, but never understand it. The final trial was combat. Tae-jin had to survive 3 minutes fighting against Yuna. He didn't have to win, just survive. The crowd expected it to be over in seconds. Humans were weak. Yuna was the greatest warrior in the Empire. The fight began. Yuna attacked fast and hard. But Tae-jin didn't try to fight back. Instead, he dodged, he rolled, he blocked. He used every bit of his human flexibility and endurance. He made himself a difficult target. 3 minutes passed, then 4, then 5. Tae-jin was bruised and bleeding, but he was still standing. Finally, at 7 minutes, Yuna swept his legs and knocked him down. She pointed her practice sword at his throat. Why are you smiling? She demanded. Tae-jin was indeed smiling, despite the blood running from his nose. Because you're magnificent, he said. I've never seen anyone fight like you. It's beautiful. Yuna had been called many things, frightening, dangerous, deadly. But no one had ever called her fighting beautiful. No one had ever looked at her with admiration instead of fear. She lowered her weapon and helped him stand. The crowd was silent. The trial master stepped forward. Lieutenant Tae-jin Kim has passed all 5 trials, he announced. The marriage is approved. Yuna looked at Tae-jin. He was small, weak by Krithian standards, and currently covered in bruises. But he had done something no one else had done. He had tried, really tried, to understand her. You could still leave, she said quietly. No one would blame you. I don't want to leave, Tae-jin said. I want to know you better. For the second time, Yuna smiled. This time, the smile was bigger. The wedding was set for the next day. Tae-jin had survived the courtship trials. But the real challenge, the year of marriage, was about to begin. The entire galaxy was watching, placing bets on how long he would last. Most gave him 3 months, but Tae-jin wasn't thinking about the galaxy's bets. He was thinking about the woman standing in front of him, lonely, fierce, and finally starting to hope that maybe, just maybe, someone could love her. He had no idea what the next year would bring. But he knew one thing for certain. He was going to try his absolute best. The first month of marriage was difficult. Taejin and Yuna lived in a large apartment in the royal palace. It had rooms designed for Krithians. Everything was too big for Taejin. The bed was enormous. The chairs were too tall. Even the doorways made him feel tiny. Yuna tried to be careful around him. She really did. But her strength was so much greater than his. When she handed him a cup, she sometimes gripped his hand too hard and left bruises. When she patted his shoulder in greeting, he stumbled forward. She started avoiding touching him at all. "I'm not made of glass," Taejin said one evening. "You might as well be," Yuna replied, frustration in her voice. "Everything about you is so breakable." The real problem came 3 weeks into the marriage. They were discussing politics, a trade agreement between the Krithian Empire and a nearby system. Yuna thought they should demand better terms. Taejin suggested a compromise. They argued back and forth. Then Yuna felt it, the rage cycle beginning. Her skin started glowing brighter. Her muscles tensed. The chemical flood was starting and she couldn't stop it. "Leave!" she said urgently. "Leave now!" But Taejin didn't understand how serious it was. He thought they were just having an argument. "Yuna, let's just talk about this." She grabbed his arm to push him away to safety. She didn't mean to hurt him, but in her enhanced state, she was too strong. His arm broke with a snap that echoed in the room. Yuna's rage vanished instantly, replaced by horror. Taejin was on the floor, holding his arm, his face white with pain. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry. I told you to leave. I told you." "It's okay," Taejin said through gritted teeth. His medical training kicked in even through the pain. "Help me to the medical bay. I'll call the doctors." "No. You help me, please." Yuna carefully lifted him. She was terrified of hurting him more. At the medical bay, the doctors fixed his arm. Yuna stood in the corner, looking like she wanted to disappear. After the doctors left, Taejin found Yuna sitting on the floor of their apartment. She had been crying, something Krithians rarely did. "You should leave," she said. "I'm too dangerous. I'll kill you eventually, just like everyone says." Taejin sat down next to her, his arm in a cast. "Teach me," he said. "What?" "Teach me about the rage cycles. When do they happen? What triggers them? Are there warning signs? If I understand them, I can help you instead of making things worse." Yuna stared at him. "I broke your arm." "Yes, and it hurts a lot. But you didn't mean to. You tried to warn me, and I didn't listen. So teach me to listen better." Over the next weeks, Yuna taught him everything about Krithian biology. The rage cycles happened when stress hormones built up too much. For most Krithians, meditation and breathing exercises helped. But Yuna's condition was more severe. She needed more tools. Taejin researched human meditation techniques. He introduced her to Korean breathing methods, different from Krithian ones. Some of them actually helped. The rage cycles didn't stop, but they became less frequent. And Taejin learned to recognize the warning signs, the slight glow to her skin, the tension in her shoulders. When he saw them, he gave her space. Slowly, they developed a rhythm. Taejin introduced Yuna to human culture. He played music for her, traditional Korean music on a gyeogyum, a string instrument. The sounds reminded Yuna of Krithian wind harps. She would sit and listen for hours, her eyes closed, her body relaxed. He showed her human art. He read her human poetry. He told her stories about Earth, about mountains and oceans and the tiny humans who lived there. Yuna taught him Krithian warrior philosophy. She trained with him every morning, teaching him movements that worked with his smaller body instead of against it. She introduced him to Krithian literature, epic poems about ancient battles and honor. They started to become friends. In the 4th month, Tae-jin introduced Yuna to his colleague from Earth via a holocall. Captain Hye-jin Park was a military officer, smart and funny. She and Yuna started talking about combat tactics, then about military bureaucracy and stupid officers, then about everything. "Your friend is nice," Yuna said after the call ended. "She likes you too," Tae-jin said. He was smiling. Yuna had never had a real friend before. The 5th month brought danger. Tae-jin and Yuna attended a diplomatic function, a boring party with politicians and nobles. They were standing together discussing nothing important when Tae-jin noticed something wrong. A servant was moving strangely, too focused, too tense. "Yuna, down!" he shouted. He threw himself in front of her just as the assassin fired an energy weapon. The blast hit Tae-jin in the chest. He collapsed, blood spreading across his formal clothes. Yuna caught him as he fell. The assassin tried to run, but Yuna's rage cycle triggered instantly. She crossed the room in 2 seconds and caught the assassin by the throat. Palace guards had to pull her off before she killed him, but her focus was on Tae-jin. He was bleeding badly, struggling to breathe. The blast had hit his lung. "Stay with me," Yuna said. Her hands were shaking as she applied pressure to his wound. "Don't you dare die." "Sorry," Tae-jin whispered. "Ruined my nice clothes." "You idiot, why did you do that?" "I meant my vows," he said. His voice was getting weaker. "To protect you, to stand by you." Yuna picked him up, so carefully, despite her panic, and ran to the medical facility. She kicked the doors open and demanded they save him. The doctors rushed him into surgery. Yuna waited outside for 6 hours. She paced back and forth, her hands still covered in his blood. Hae-jin came as soon as she heard, taking the fastest ship from Earth. She sat with Yuna, not saying much, just being there. When the doctors finally came out, they said Tae-jin would live. The surgery was successful. Yuna went into his recovery room and sat beside his bed. He was unconscious, breathing with the help of machines. She took his hand, so small in hers, and held it gently. "You jumped in front of a weapon for me," she said quietly. "No one has ever protected me before. I'm supposed to be the protector. I'm the warrior. You're just a scientist who likes books." She was crying again. "But you're the bravest person I've ever met, and I think I'm falling in love with you." Tae-jin's fingers squeezed hers slightly. His eyes opened, just a little. "Good," he whispered. "Because I'm already in love with you?" Yuna laughed and cried at the same time. After that day, something fundamental changed. They weren't just married anymore. They were partners. They were a team. Tae-jin recovered slowly. Yuna took care of him, learning to be gentle, learning to adjust her strength. When he was well enough, they started taking walks together in the palace gardens. They talked for hours about everything and nothing. News spread across the galaxy. The human had survived an assassination attempt by protecting the Krithian princess. The betting pools were confused. 6 months had passed and Tae-jin was still alive. More than alive, he seemed happy. By the 8th month, they had settled into a comfortable life. Yuna's rage cycles had decreased significantly. She smiled often now. She laughed at Tae-jin's terrible jokes. She started writing poetry again and actually showed it to him. Tae-jin learned Krithian cooking and made her favorite dishes. He organized her schedule and helped with her military paperwork. He made their apartment feel like a home, adding small touches, plants from Earth, art from both their worlds, photographs of them together. They had their difficult days. Sometimes Yuna's rage cycles were bad, and she had to lock herself in a meditation room. Sometimes Tae-jin missed Earth so much it hurt. Sometimes they argued about silly things like what temperature to keep the apartment or whose turn it was to deal with boring administrative work. But they worked through it. Together. On the night before their 9-month anniversary, they sat on their balcony, looking at the Krithian moons. "Do you regret it?" Yuna asked. Volunteering? No, Tae-jin said immediately. Do you regret accepting me? No. Yuna took his hand carefully, gently. I was so lonely before you. I didn't even realize how lonely until you were here. I know, Tae-jin said. I could see it in your eyes. In the council chamber that first day. You looked like you had given up hope. I had, Yuna admitted. And then this small, strange human stood up and said I was worth the risk. She smiled. Best decision I ever made. 3 months remained until their 1-year anniversary. The galaxy was watching, amazed. The impossible was happening. The human and the Crithian princess were making it work. But their greatest challenge was still ahead. Neither of them knew that in just a few weeks, a new threat would emerge that would test their bond in ways they couldn't imagine. The news came suddenly. A species called the Vratics had appeared at the edge of the galaxy. They were like insects, millions of them working as one mind. They didn't communicate. They didn't negotiate. They just consumed everything in their path. 3 civilizations had already fallen. Entire planets stripped of resources, populations killed or captured. The Vratics were heading toward the central systems now. Both Crithian and human territories were in danger. Emperor Vorthok Zhaoji called an emergency war council. Yuna was needed. She was the Empire's greatest general. She had to lead the Crithian war fleet. You'll be safe, Yuna told Tae-jin as she packed her military equipment. Human space is on the other side of the galaxy. The Vratics won't reach Earth for years, if ever. I'm coming with you, Tae-jin said. Absolutely not. This is war, real war. You're not a soldier. I'm a xenobiologist and a strategic advisor. I can help. I've been analyzing the Vratics' data. No. Yuna's voice was firm. I can't focus on commanding a fleet if I'm worried about you dying. Please, Tae-jin, stay here where it's safe. They argued for hours. Finally, Tae-jin agreed. Yuna left the next morning with the Crithian fleet, 200 warships heading to the front lines. Tae-jin lasted 3 days before he broke his promise. He contacted Hye-jin on Earth. I need a ship, he said. Tae-jin, she told you to stay safe. She needs help. I've been studying the Vratics. They're hive-minded, which means they have a central communication pattern. If we can disrupt it, we can confuse them. But the Crithian military doesn't think like that. They're all about direct combat. Hye-jin sighed. You're going to go anyway, aren't you? Yes. You're an idiot. A pause. I'll get you a ship. 2 days later, Tae-jin arrived at the war zone on a human medical frigate called the Soul's Hope. His friend Dongwoo Lee was the pilot, a crazy, brilliant flyer who owed Tae-jin several favors. The battle was already underway when they arrived. Space was filled with ships, Crithian warships fighting against the Vratic swarm. The Vratic ships looked like they were made of bone and metal fused together, organic and mechanical at the same time. Tae-jin contacted the Crithian flagship. This is Lieutenant Kim requesting permission to join the fleet. The response came from a Crithian general named Vex. Absolutely not. We don't need human interference. Go home before you get killed. I need to speak with Princess Yuna. The princess is in command of the forward attack. She has no time for her pet human. Leave the war zone immediately. Tae-jin switched channels and tried to reach Yuna directly, but the battle communications were chaotic. He couldn't get through. General Vex was known for being proud and stubborn. He commanded the main fleet while Yuna led the attack ships. Tae-jin watched the battle patterns on his screens, and his heart sank. The Crithians were fighting bravely, but they were making a mistake. They're pushing too hard, Tae-jin told Dongwoo. The Vratics are deliberately creating a weak point to lure them in. Should we warn them? I tried. Vex won't listen. They watched helplessly as the Crithian forward fleet, led by Yuna, pushed into what looked like a gap in the Vratics' formation. Then the trap closed. Vratics' ships swarmed from above and below, surrounding the Crithian attack force. No, 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 Taejin whispered. Yuna's flagship took heavy damage. Taejin watched on the scanners as her ship's life support failed. She made it to an escape pod, but the pod was damaged too. It drifted in space, losing power. The main Krithian fleet was in chaos. General Vex ordered a retreat to regroup. He was abandoning the trapped ships, including Yuna's pod. "Are they just leaving her?" Dongwu asked, shocked. Taejin's hands clenched into fists. "Take us in!" "What?" "Take us in! We're getting her out!" "Taejin, we're a medical ship! We have no weapons! The Vratics will destroy us!" "Then fly better than you've ever flown before." Dongwu looked at his friend and saw absolute determination. "You're definitely an idiot," he said, but he turned the ship toward the battle zone. The Soul's Hope was small and fast. Dongwu flew like a madman, dodging between Vratic's ships, using debris as cover. Energy blasts flew past them. One hit their shield, and the whole ship shook. "There!" Taejin pointed at Yuna's escape pod on the scanner. They wove through the swarm. A Vratic ship fired at them. Dongwu spun the ship sideways, and the blast missed by meters. Another ship approached from below. Dongwu dove, using a destroyed Krithian cruiser as a shield. They reached Yuna's pod. Taejin put on a spacesuit and opened the airlock. Dongwu matched velocity with the pod. Taejin jumped across the gap, something incredibly stupid and dangerous. He grabbed the pod's handle and activated the emergency coupling. Inside the pod, Yuna was unconscious, her suit damaged, life support critical. Taejin got her into the ship's medical bay and started emergency treatment. "Got her!" he yelled to Dongwu. "Get us out!" But now they had a problem. The Vratics had noticed them. Dozens of ships were converging on their position. Taejin opened all communication channels and broadcast on every frequency. "This is Lieutenant Taejin Kim to any Krithian ship. Princess Yuna is injured and aboard the Soul's Hope. If anyone cares about their princess, now would be a really good time to help." For a moment, nothing happened. Then, one by one, Krithian ships broke formation. Not the big warships, Vex had ordered them to retreat, but the smaller ships, the fighters and scouts, the common soldiers who loved their princess. 20 Krithian vessels formed a protective circle around the Soul's Hope. They fought with desperate courage, holding off the Vratic swarm. Together, they fought their way out of the combat zone. When they were finally safe, Taejin collapsed into a chair, shaking from adrenaline. Dongwu was pale and sweating. "Never again," Dongwu said. "Never ask me to do that again." "Deal," Taejin said. In the medical bay, Yuna's eyes opened. She saw Taejin sitting beside her, his hands bandaged from operating damaged ship controls, his face exhausted. "You came for me?" she whispered. "Of course I did." "You flew into a war zone, in a medical ship, with no weapons." "Yes. You could have died. So could you." Taejin took her hand gently. "You're my wife, Yuna. Did you really think I would just let you drift in space?" Tears rolled down Yuna's face. In her entire life, no one had ever risked everything for her like this. She had always been the protector, the warrior, the one who saved others. But this small human had flown through an alien swarm to save her. "I love you," she said, the first time she had spoken those words to anyone. "I love you too," Taejin replied, "though I'd appreciate it if you didn't scare me like that again." She laughed through her tears. The battle continued for weeks, but everything changed after that day. Taejin's analysis of the Vratic's communication patterns proved correct. He worked with the Krithian scientists to develop a disruption device. When the Vratic's communications were scrambled, their hive mind couldn't coordinate. They became confused and disorganized. The combined forces of multiple alien races pushed the Vratics back. It wasn't an easy victory. Thousands died, but they won. General Vex was quietly removed from command for abandoning the princess. The soldiers who had broken formation to save her were honored as heroes. Tae-jin and Yuna returned to the Krithian homeworld 2 weeks before their 1-year anniversary. Yuna had changed. She smiled more. She held Tae-jin's hand in public. She talked about him with obvious pride. The galaxy noticed. The betting pools had closed. Everyone had lost their bets because everyone had underestimated the same thing. Love doesn't follow logic. It doesn't care about strength or weakness. Sometimes the bravest thing someone can do is choose to love someone when everyone else is too afraid to try. Their anniversary was coming. 1 year. Against all odds, they had made it. But more than that, they had built something real. The anniversary celebration was held in the same Galactic Council chamber where it had all begun 1 year ago. But this time, the atmosphere was completely different. Instead of silence and doubt, there was curiosity and wonder. Tae-jin stood beside Yuna at the front of the chamber. He wore formal clothes, a mix of human and Krithian styles. Yuna wore a dress instead of armor, something no one had ever seen before. She looked beautiful, and more importantly, she looked happy. Emperor Vorthak addressed the assembled representatives. His voice was strong, but there was emotion in it too. 1 year ago, I stood here and asked a question, he began. I asked who was brave enough to marry my daughter. I thought I was looking for a warrior, someone strong enough to withstand her strength, someone fierce enough to match her in battle. He paused. I was wrong. The Emperor looked at Tae-jin. This human is not the strongest warrior. He is not the greatest fighter. His bones break easily. His skin is soft. By every measure of physical power, he should have failed. Vorthak's 4 eyes gleamed. But he succeeded where others failed because he understood something the rest of us did not. Strength is not just physical. Courage is not just about fighting. He was brave enough to love my daughter when everyone else was too afraid to try. The chamber was completely silent. Every species, every representative was listening. My daughter has changed, Vorthak continued. Her rage cycles have decreased by 80%. She smiles. She laughs. She has friends. She writes poetry and shares it. She is not just a warrior anymore. She is a complete person. And that is because one human saw her not as a monster to fear, but as a person to love. Yuna stepped forward. This was unexpected. She had not been scheduled to speak. Public speaking was not her strength, but she wanted to say something. I want to tell you about loneliness, she said. Her deep voice carried through the chamber. I was lonely my entire life. People looked at me and saw only violence. They saw a weapon, not a person. I had killed 3 suitors, yes, but they were cruel. They insulted me, degraded me, treated me like a servant, and my biology responded the only way it could. She looked out at the crowd. I thought I would be alone forever. I thought no one could love someone like me. Then a human volunteer, a scientist who spent 3 years learning my language and my culture, who studied everything about me. Not just the violent parts, but everything. Yuna's hand found Tae-jin's and held it gently. He broke his arm because I couldn't control my strength. Did he leave? No. He asked me to teach him about my rage cycles so he could help me. He took an energy blast meant for me. He flew into a war zone in an unarmed ship to save me. He did all of this not because he was strong, but because he was kind, because he cared. There were tears in her eyes. My husband taught me that strength is not about how much you can destroy. It is about how much you can endure, how much you can love, how much you can give. He is the strongest person I know, and he cannot even lift a Krithian chair. Several aliens in the audience laughed softly at that. Even Tae-jin smiled. I am not the same person I was a year ago, Yuna continued. I am better, happier, more whole. And that is because someone was brave enough to see me, really see me, and still chose to stay. She sat down. The chamber erupted in applause. It was not the polite applause of politics. It was genuine appreciation. Tai Jin stood up. He had not planned to speak either, but it felt right. "I am not special," he said. His voice was much quieter than Yuna's, but the chamber's acoustics carried it. "I am just a scientist who reads too much and thinks too much. I was scared when I volunteered. I knew the risks. Everyone told me I would die." He looked at Yuna. "But I had read about her. Not just the violence, all of it. The poetry, the charity work, the soldiers she saved, the children's hospital she volunteered at. I saw someone who was hurting and lonely and desperate for someone to understand her. And I thought, I could try. I could at least try." Taejin turned back to the audience. "Humans have a saying, love is not because of, but in spite of. I did not fall in love with Yuna despite her challenges. I fell in love with her because she is brave, brilliant, loyal, and she has the most beautiful laugh I have ever heard. Though it took me 6 months to actually make her laugh." More laughter from the audience. Yuna was smiling. Her cheeks slightly darker, the Krithian equivalent of blushing. "We are announcing a new initiative today," Taejin said. "A cultural exchange program between species. Not just diplomatic meetings, but real cultural sharing. Learning about each other's art, music, history, and philosophy. Understanding each other as people, not just political entities." Emperor Vorthak stood again. "The Krithian Empire and Earth are officially forming a permanent alliance. But more than that, we are opening our culture to true exchange. Any species who wishes to participate is welcome." The announcement was met with enthusiastic responses. Several ambassadors immediately requested information about the program. After the official ceremony ended, there was a celebration. Taejin and Yuna found themselves surrounded by well-wishers. The Vraxian ambassador, who had been too afraid to volunteer a year ago, shook Taejin's hand. "You are braver than any of us," the ambassador said, "and you have taught the galaxy an important lesson." Taejin was there too, having flown in from Earth for the celebration. She hugged both Taejin and Yuna. "You crazy idiots," she said affectionately. "You actually did it." "We had help," Yuna said, smiling at her friend. "Speaking of which," Taejin said, "I am officially requesting to be part of the cultural exchange program. Someone needs to teach these Krithians about proper Korean barbecue." The celebration continued late into the night. Taejin and Yuna finally escaped to a quiet balcony overlooking the capital city. The Krithian moons were bright in the sky. "1 year," Yuna said softly. "1 year," Taejin agreed. "It went faster than I expected. Are you happy?" Taejin looked at her. This woman who had terrified an entire galaxy, who could break him with one hand, who had somehow become the most important person in his life. "Happier than I have ever been," he said honestly. Yuna kissed him, carefully, gently. She had learned to be so careful with him, but he had also learned to be brave with her. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we live," Taejin said. "We work on the cultural exchange program. We visit Earth so you can meet my family. We keep learning about each other. We have adventures. We have a life together." "That sounds good," Yuna said. She leaned against him, and he wrapped his arms around her as much as he could. They fit together strangely. Different sizes, different species, different worlds. But they fit. The galaxy had learned something important from their story. Power was not just about strength. Courage was not just about fighting. Sometimes the bravest thing someone could do was choose love over fear, understanding over judgment, and patience over pride. Taejin and Yuna became symbols of a new era, an era where different species did not just tolerate each other, but tried to understand each other, where differences were not threats, but opportunities to learn and grow. 5 years later, they would have children, 2 of them, impossible hybrids that scientists said could never exist. Their daughter Ji-won would have her mother's strength and her father's mind. Their son Minho would have his father's kindness and his mother's spirit. But that is a story for another time. For now, on this balcony under alien moons, a human and a Crithian stood together. They had survived the impossible year. They had proven that love was stronger than fear, that understanding was more powerful than strength, and that sometimes the bravest warriors were the ones who chose to love. The galaxy would never forget the story of the princess who was too fierce to love and the human who was brave enough to try. It became a legend told across 1,000 worlds, a reminder that the greatest adventures often begin with a single person standing up and saying, "I volunteer." And in the quiet moment on the balcony, Tae-jin and Yuna were not thinking about legends or history or the galaxy watching them. They were simply thinking about each other, about tomorrow, and about all the tomorrows they would share together. "I love you," Yuna said. "I love you too," Tae-jin replied. And in that moment, under the light of 3 moons on a world far from Earth, that was all that mattered.